In a world where trauma is real, where people seek out distraction from their internal lives and relationships with others, and where no one is taught healthy self-care, help was needed. In 2019, the mission began. Find a way to help people understand and better their mental health. Seek out ways to explore relationships and how they work. Fight against the stigmas that surround counseling and therapy. And, most importantly,
do all of that so you don't have to be a therapist to understand it. Hey everybody. Welcome to Season 2 of Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me here in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. Week 3 of Love Month is here, and this week's guest is a doozy. This week, we're welcoming back our first returning guest, Dr. Teri Murphy. Teri is a licensed marital and family therapist and trainer with a private practice in Franklin, Tennessee. She's been practicing therapy for over 7 years and supervises clinicians toward state licensure. She's also certified in practicing and supervising others in learning emotionally focused therapy and assists with EFT trainings throughout the United States. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. Criminal lawyers see bad people at their best. Divorce lawyers see good people at their worst. But we dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Teri.
Hello.
Welcome back. You are officially the first return guest to come back into the theater. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me back again. It feels like a huge honor to get to be your first repeat visitor. I love the show myself. I get a lot out of it listening to you. So thank you for having me again.
Well, thank you. I said this to you on a conversation we were having a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think I've ever said it on air. And so I think that it's a good time to offer it where everybody can hear it. But you were a total inspiration in kind of the conception and like the making of the show, like your passion for making mental health something that is accessible and understandable for everybody was like a main ingredient that went into the soup of the podcast. And I do not think that this is something that would exist had I not, sat in classes that you were teaching and been your friend and like looked up to you as a mentor. Like, I think without your influence and inspiration, like this wouldn't even be a thing. So thank you so much for like just being you.
Thank you.
Doing the work that you do, being the person that you are, and also for being a guest. So that's kind of a weird like full circle moment to like have you at the front end and then like as part of the DNA and then also to be back in it.
That's incredibly meaningful to me. Like my cheeks feel warm and I'm like squirmy over here practicing what we preach, taking in what you're saying too. Thank you. Yeah, we both really do have that shared passion that we want every human being to be able to have access to these kind of tools and this knowledge. And then you've brought this really fun aspect into everyone can relate to, like movies, film, cinema. We can see ourselves in these characters and this real life stuff that's really happening.
Yeah, I think something that I think has appeared more to me lately on the past couple of episodes, but that I think is just true of art and movies in general, is I've had guests on that, we both watch the same movie, but either we'll gravitate towards different characters in the movies, or we just perceive certain scenes or certain things in different ways. And what I love the most about it is I don't think either of us is right.
Yeah.
I just think it's all of the filters and lenses that have been built upon like our stories as we've moved forward, so that, we same scene, but we're seeing it in different ways and assigning different meanings to it. And I think that's one of the things that makes the conversation so great on the show, is that you don't just get that. And really the original idea for the show was I was going to do it myself, or maybe have the same co-host every week. But then when I started doing the guests, originally it was, I'll do it until I find the right one to ask to be the co-host. But like, I think, 5 or 6 in, it was like, oh no, this is great, because it's just a different perspective.
Different flavor every single time, different perspectives coming in. Yeah, I think that it makes it so rich. And then my guess would be too that different people who are listening to the show then connect with different guests, different people,
That's
different
my hope.
perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've had people ask me before, like, maybe a guest has said a certain thing and they've asked me like, oh, do you endorse that? Do you support that? Or whatever. I was like, well, that's not what it's about. Like, I wouldn't want somebody to be a guest on the show with the object or intent for me to convince them of anything.
Right.
And I said, I think that you are, as a returning, like, you're like the 55th like guest, although maybe 54th because you've been on once before.
That's
but
right.
But
I know. How does that go down in the record book, right?
I don't know, like an asterisk or something.
Like in baseball, yeah.
Yeah, but I said, every single guest I've had on, I've learned something from every one of them, and it's because I get to hear part of their story, why they do what they do, which, we've already done your why therapy. So if you're listening to the show and you like Teri and you want to hear her why therapy, we've got a great episode on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in season 1. But I get to hear their stories. I get to hear kind of how they do what they do. And then through the conversation of the movie, get to, all of that stuff kind of mixes together. And every single conversation, I walk away from it just in awe. Most of the time saying, like, I could just sit and bask in the guests' like radiance for the whole time and listen to them talk, because so many carry so much wisdom and compassion and brilliance with them that I'm just like, man, I get to learn from somebody new every week. And so for me, it's not about, the Therapist Theater is not a place you come to and you put yourself under. It's a place where you come to as like a guest instructor, and you get to bring your whole self and like just talk about where you come from. And my hope is, because there's so many different people out there, all of us have our own mental health. All of us have our own relationships that maybe work a little bit differently than the last person's. So my hope is that anyone could pick any episode and get something out of. Yeah.
Yeah. You can just pick it up, and there's always, like, because of that human element, I think that you're leading with, you can find yourself there somewhere and some sort of part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for being back.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are, I think, the only guest that I have not asked to choose a movie.
I was so nervous about what you were about to say.
But
yeah, that's right. What is he gonna? I'm the only guest who,
who is named Teri Murphy.
Yeah,
So far, and this will change in a couple of days, you're the only part of a married couple that's been on the show.
Yes.
Although I am recording with Rob Kerwin a little later, and his wife Summer's already been on, so you'll have a slightly less exclusive club then.
That's okay.
But you're the only person that I've made suggestions to for the movie, and it's strictly out of, like, they were movies that I really wanted to do because I thought they'd be so interesting. And I just thought Teri's take is going to be so great on this that I just want to trust it to her.
Man, it's a huge honor. This one, if you had asked me which thing to choose, this would have been what I would have chosen. So we
Really?
were like right on the same page about this.
Okay.
So when I first started seeing the previews about this and started reading reviews, I was like, oh, this is going to be something Josh and I at least we have to talk about it. Be such a good episode. And then I think I texted you like 3 minutes and I'm like, and I'm already crying. Like it's already impacting me. And
Yeah.
just got this felt sense when I saw the previews of it that it was going to be a powerful sort of show.
So what movie did you bring for us to talk about?
We're going to be talking about Marriage Story.
Marriage Story. If we would have recorded this, I guess a week ago, the Oscars wouldn't have happened. But now they have.
I have.
And Laura Dern got Best Supporting.
Oh, she sure did. And she was amazing.
She
loved her
got Best
character.
Supporting. Scarlett Johansson, only, I think, person in history in the same year to be nominated for lead and supporting. So that's kind of cool.
That is amazing.
I watched it. First off, I have never felt very great about Noah Baumbach movies, the director and writer.
Right.
I did watch a video essay on YouTube a little while ago talking about the type of dialogue that he writes is very realistic because people talk over each other
Yes, they do.
in his dialogue.
Yes.
And it's like typically messier than other writers, and the person that was making this video essay felt like that made it more real, which I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
So I was already going in going, ooh, Baumbach, boo. But then I was like, Kylo Ren and Black Widow are married. Like, why
I
not?
can get behind that. We
Why
can
not
ship that
watch
relationship.
Yeah. But you and Chris started watching it before Leanne and I had a chance to. So when you were texting like, oh my gosh, 3 minutes in, I was like, we haven't watched it. Spoilers.
Yep.
But then even when we were hitting play on it, either later that night or the next day, I was like, so Teri said 3 minutes in, so we were both like, ugh, getting ready. But I don't know where to start with this movie because there were so many parts that I didn't know how I was supposed to be feeling.
Yes.
I told Leanne up until a very specific scene, which is later on in it, so I don't really want to go into that scene yet, but I felt like I have so much tension in me while I'm watching this movie.
I feel it in my legs right now.
And I don't know like what I'm supposed to do with it because I kept feeling like, clearly there's this undercurrent of something in this relationship between these two people, but they're not doing anything about it.
No.
And I kept thinking like, okay, so I don't feel like this is a movie where, you and I could look at and say, well, this is what they should be doing right now.
Right.
Because at the very first scene is them in a mediator's office. Is that? Yeah. So they've already made the decision.
It's
that
already, they are clearly in divorce, like proceeding separation, that sort of thing. But it starts out with like this positive, what they love about each other too, like right after that. So ish.
One side of it is,
yeah.
I'm looking up the character names right now because I'm really terrible at like Adam Driver's Charlie, Scarlett Johansson's Nicole. So like, it starts out, they're in this mediator's office and I remember in school, you guys telling us like, you're not mediators. So
Right, that's right.
if a couple is moving towards that, you are not the one that helps them figure out custody and possessions. So because of that, I don't have familiarity with what a mediator does. But this guy had them both write up lists of why they fell in love or why they loved each other or whatever. And kind of like even explicitly states, these things can get so messy. I want to remind people.
Yeah.
And I felt like I kind of like that. But on the other hand, like they're already there. It just feels like it would be so painful to.
Right. Like what's the purpose of that? That's what I kept thinking in that moment. Like, why? I get it for the movie. Like that makes my emotions get really big. But I'm kind of with you in that. So like if I'm sitting with a couple and they are with me because they're trying to decide, do we stay together? Are we not? Like, is the bond between us, is it possible? Like, could there be passion between us? And it depends, right? It's part of what divorce and divorce adjustment class is, you know, when you're in your program and sitting with couples, where are they in this sort of continuum between connection and disconnection? And it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell sometimes, but I'm kind of with you in that once they've actually made that choice, we are not going to be together. My job as a therapist would no longer be to try and look at the bond between them. My job is to help them then start to grieve that loss, to figure out how to have closure in their relationship. Sometimes what we will talk about is the shared sort of grief, right? So helping them put together a cohesive narrative of what their story was, but not trying to help them stay bonded as far as like a romantic sort of bond anymore. Yeah, they're going to co-parent, you know, if they have children together. And the divorce process itself can be so horrible. I get the sort of idea of let's remember some things so maybe it'll be good. But I think that's kind of the whole, like as the movie sat with me, I was thinking, it's almost like this statement of how messy it actually is, even when people have the intention to be cordial and do things in the best interest of their kid. It was hard for me to hold both of those in the beginning of the movie. Like they're separating, but then having these conversations about what they love about each other in such an intense, emotional way.
Well, and I think that's one of the things about the movie that I don't want to say scared me, but I was at least aware of going in, is that Adam Driver is such an intense actor.
Yes.
And I kind of wondered if like that was one of the reasons why I had this tension in me, because like nearly every movie that he's in, and even Girls when he was on the show, he has scenes where he loses it and yells as loud as he can, and he gets the forehead vein, and you know, he's a very like
he'll go all the way there.
Yeah, and so I just kind of kept thinking, when's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And so it was almost like for the whole movie, I'm waiting on that shoe to drop.
Yes.
And it doesn't. And maybe that was the chance. I don't know. But I mean, clearly I think the movie did its job of like, you know, the main story being the relationship itself is housing this unprocessed, unexplored anxiety and tension. Yeah. And so just the fact that it's making me feel that way means that, wow, like that, they did a great job establishing that relationship.
It actually, how personal can I talk about right now?
It's up to you.
So I've talked about this early on in my podcast, but my parents went through a really volatile, sort of violent divorce when I was in my early teen years. And what I felt in my body, I actually think Baumbach did a good job of this, that tension, is the other shoe going to drop? That sort of thing. That's what my body felt like for years leading up to my parents' divorce. It felt very similar in my body. So when I was watching the movie, I was having these sort of, it's not like a flashback, but I had these images of like what my body felt like in the house where I grew up. And it was so similar, this sort of sometimes cordial things, which actually weren't calming or soothing in that moment. It was still just, even when there was like politeness or a relief from some of the conflict or whatever, it was still kind of like, yeah, but that's gonna come around again, because the bond wasn't safe and it was all unprocessed. So it felt like everything was coils, like everything was coiled up, all this potential energy all the time, and it never really would get released in an appropriate or vulnerable or honest sort of, we're looking face to face, going to have this conversation or have closure together or grief together in that way. So that feeling that I felt as a kid is very similar to like what I was feeling watching this movie, which was phenomenal. Like that's, I kept turning to my husband, I kept turning to Chris and saying, this is what it was like. Do you feel that in your belly like that? And I couldn't tell because his parents are together. He has this secure sort of family background.
Chris is so laid back anyway.
He is. He probably had a totally different experience. That he was like, yeah, I can feel the tension. But the thing I was wondering is, if you didn't grow up in it, I wonder if it would feel if it would feel the same in your body. I have no way of knowing.
You know, I didn't even think about this until just now, but like both of us being kids coming from divorced families.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I wonder if an adult who wasn't a kid of divorce but had gotten divorced themselves, I wonder if that would be a different type of tension that they felt.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder too. It is totally a
Because I
thought
think
that I
like
was
we're
having.
watching it, imagining the parents,
Yeah, right.
you know, imagining us being, you know, shorter, like
Yes,
looking up
the
at
little
them,
one. Yeah,
versus I wonder if maybe somebody who had been through a divorce but had not been a kid of it is,
like looking from the parent point of view. Yeah, because I didn't identify as much with Charlie or Nicole as I did the kid.
the kid.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name either. I'm terrible at these.
It wasn't Noah, was it? I'm trying to remember his name.
Henry, I think.
Henry.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was Henry. Yeah.
I think so. I'm thinking about that scene with the mediator, and it starts with Charlie reading his list, and then like it moves over to Nicole, and she is like, "No, I'm not going to read it. I don't want to." And she has this look on her face. I don't think it's anger. It reminded me of a kid who is feeling like, I'm picturing them on the playground and they don't like how things are going, but they don't want anybody to see that they are affected by it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that that's like fear and hurt and maybe some anger, but she's like steeling her face, like her eyes are kind of welling up, but she's got her jaw like locked. And she's like, "No," I said, "I'm not going to read it."
Yeah.
And then she ends up like storming out. And I mean, I can only imagine if they're so far into this process, which it goes farther. But like at that point, the decision's been made. They're trying to do it, quote unquote, amicably.
Right.
And now she's hearing these things that I can only imagine that she wanted to hear
Earlier.
forever.
Right. It happens all the time. Like, again, like at this, I work with what we would call burnt out pursuers a lot in emotionally focused therapy, which is this modality that I use. And the idea is it's for the partner who has said, where are you? Where are you? I miss you. I want to be closer. And is really seeking closer connection in the relationship. When you do that over years and the call's never responded to, it's not really answered, the other partner is missing it or not understanding, right? They just miss each other. That partner who's been bringing it up, hoping for so long for that connection, eventually, if the call never comes, that it like extinguishes that sort of light. The light kind of goes out. That's what we would call a burnt out pursuer. It's the idea that you give up hope that your reach is going to be responded to. And it takes some time, you know, for that to happen. But once that happens, if it's really, really gone, if the hope is really gone, it's extraordinarily painful to then hope again, to actually hear something positive from the other partner that you've longed for, maybe for years. It sounds like, you know, in the movie, it had been years of this, you know, moving to the other coast and, you know, climbing this career ladder and that sort of thing, but losing a bit of that partnership, that connection. I could imagine the hope was gone, and then hearing those things that she had longed for, to your point, for so long, she'd have to go through so much pain and loss and grief, and they're not grieving partners anymore. They're not healing partners anymore. They're not going to do that together. Like, I saw something similar. I thought the same sort of thing. What I thought is, she's burnt out. It's past that point, but it still hurts, right? But she's not going to go to him anymore.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder if it's because you develop this association time after time of making a connection reach and not being received. You develop this association between hope and pain.
Yeah, that's right. Ooh, that's right. That's right. I
And
felt that
so-
in my gut when you said that.
And so then to like hear those things and to maybe even imagine herself back in those moments
Yep.
of wanting this and wanting that and
Yes.
knowing that she felt that hope and all of a sudden remembering the rejection, either intentional or unintentional, but
Right.
it doesn't really matter when it's
Right.
attachment.
That's right.
It's
Your brain doesn't know the
it still
difference.
perceives it the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those things weren't this like wonderful thing for her to hear. They were more
Jabs.
daggers. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I have a client who said this. I offer you an olive branch and to you it feels like a hot poker. Right. And that was exactly the sort of thing that happens all the time in couples, either with conflict or like this, that are making a really hard call to not be together anymore. It doesn't mean that they instantly then feel nothing. You know, all those years, it takes some time and process to detach all of those connections, you know.
And it's not even like once you make that call, you all of a sudden know how to interact better.
Oh my gosh. No, what happened, like if you're not together because you've missed each other and there's misunderstandings and pain and communication issues, deciding you want to, you know, consciously uncouple or make this a more amicable, a more amicable sort of divorce doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden be bequeathed this gift of beautiful communication just because that's your intention. Your intention when you were married was probably to speak well to each other and to be understood and to try and understand each other. I feel like most people's intentions are not to harm each other. I think a lot of it's misunderstandings, it's unprocessed trauma, it's reactivity, it's not knowing how, it's so many other things. You don't instantly just know how to do it.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a genuine wonder. Like if you do ever get to the place where like I want to intend to harm you, I wonder if that's always a return to a serve. Like if it's always like I feel hurt, so I want to hurt you.
Yeah.
That I'm saying this not as a fact because I don't know it, but that feels to me something that would be more true than in a vacuum I'm going to intend to
I think that's true.
harm you.
That's certainly been what it has been like in my clinical practice, you know, for sure, seeing and working with people, really getting down to what's driving some of what looks like destructive, self-destructive, harmful behavior. When you get down there, it typically is rooted in pain. I mean, it's a real rare person, I think, that actually intends harm in a vacuum.
Yeah. And one thing that I've tried to instill in my clients is, you know, your feelings are neither good or bad or right or wrong.
Yeah.
Your feelings just are. They're signals. They give us info.
Yep.
What we do with that info is up to us.
Yeah.
But the story that we're telling ourselves that we are having these feelings in regards to might be right or wrong.
Yeah, that's
so like no matter what my feeling is, it's correct. But what if I'm interpreting what's happening in such a way that maybe isn't true?
Yeah, that's good.
And so if I have a chance to get my story straight, would that change? And that there's been times, I say there's been times, like they're few and far between, that happens with Leanne and I where, you know, maybe, you know, we're having a conflict about the same thing, but I've got a story in my head, she's got a story in her head.
Yep.
And we go down that road for a bit, and then eventually we have to kind of pause and go, okay, wait. What is the message that is happening inside of me?
Yeah.
What's the message that's happening inside of you?
Yep.
Because I am kind of the mindset now where it's a very rare thing that I really understand where Leanne's coming from. And I still am, this isn't it, but it's the best word I have, opposed to it. Like, if I really understand her, then there's something in me that goes into empathy and, like, goes into the bond that we have.
Yeah.
And it's not about being
right or wrong, good or bad. So
It's,
it's interesting. I was talking to a colleague of mine, mentor of mine, and we were talking about this trust versus mistrust that often pops up in therapy, right? So like blocks to being able to access your own emotions. So you feel something in your body, and instead of kind of being curious, you want to just move away from it, or you're reactive. It's just a block. There's a block there, right? And so all of us have it. You know, it could pop up at any sort of point. And it's really, we could call it mistrust, you know, in a lot of ways. I don't trust
Of
what's
ourselves?
of ourselves
Okay.
or of someone else. If someone, like if I say something to you and it hits you in like a weird sort of way, you feel funky about it, you'll have a story that pops up, you know, in your mind. And the story is usually like, it's like mistrusting, and that we're actually wired for that. That is a safety mechanism in every single human being. We all have it around certain sorts of things. Like if people recommend a song to me, my instant feeling is mistrust. Like I'm like,
I send you so many book recommendations.
I don't feel it that way about books.
Okay,
No, but
interesting.
music, and I'm married to a musician, so it's interesting. It's just that wasn't my primacy of learning or language, and so I'm like, what are you trying to say to me? What is it
Do you
that you're
assign
trying
more
to?
meaning to a music
I
recommendation?
do. Yeah,
Okay.
books just feel like knowledge.
So you're trying to like
What are you trying to tell
interpret
me?
a message that the
Yes.
person is giving you.
Yes,
Okay.
instead of just accepting the thing. And here's why. So this is what my mentor and I were talking about, and I think it's fascinating. Is when you are in your emotion, there is no past or no future. There's no right or wrong. It just is. When you're actually
Here and
in
now.
your here and now feeling. So when I'm in my body, my heart is online, I'm just with someone, I can just be in that space. And it really is a space of non-judgment, empathy, curiosity, and openness. And that's much more like, to oversimplify, right brain to right brain, we are co-regulating. Now, meaning creation, we have to bring in our prefrontal cortex, left sort of brain type stuff. We're bringing that in. That makes judgments. That tells me what time it is. It tells me right or wrong, good or bad. And it's also the story that I make up about whatever this feeling is. And we have to have that part too. Or we are only in the felt sense, only in the sort of here and now place, but we're not necessarily making sense of, why do I feel good right now? Why do I feel bad? How do I do this again? Like that's the survival sort of piece as
Because you're
well.
thinking, how do I reproduce it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever had that? Like, I feel so good right now. I don't want it to end. And like, how did we get here? Like, why are we so
Then
connected?
you're deconstructing it and you're
Yeah.
in the meta. Yeah.
It happens in the positive. It happens in the more negative space too. When I drank too much alcohol, I had this hangover. Now I feel like garbage the next day. I'm going to remember how that feels. I don't ever want to feel like this again. So I tell myself a story. I'm not going to do that. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's always this story that we attach to whatever the feeling is. Both are equally important. And therapy is really both, no matter what modality you go into. I'm either going to dig into this right brain, here and now, in the moment process, and then believe that change happens there, or I'm going to come in through checking those narratives, and it starts there. But either way, I'm going to get into both sort of parts. You know what I mean? Anyway, mentor and I talking about this stuff. The blocks that are coming up are not right brain blocks. They're not about the here and now or emotion or presence. It's all about the story that we're telling ourselves. Your body is just picking up on something. It's the story. It's the, what does it mean, where we usually get blocked and hooked up. And there's meaning for that. I've really been doing a lot of work with myself recently on not getting hard on myself about the blocks. That the blocks are also as equally important of information as emotional cues, right? If I have mistrust about a thing, it means I either have pain there, or I have extra fear around that, or something has happened to me before. And I just need to be gentle with myself and pay attention instead of trying to like throw my shoulder against the block or run around it and do it anyway. Like just to listen and be curious even about that. Like, why, if you sent me like a Third Day song that, I don't know, I just picked a band off the top of my brain. I don't know what that says about me. I'm doing it right now. Like if you sent me that song, instead of being like, I wonder what this is about, I could just ask you, hey, you were thinking of me with this song. I'd love to know what made you think of me.
Yeah.
And just check the narrative.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing that in this movie, I'm like, one question could have really maybe, I think this all the time watching TV shows. I wonder what would happen if you just asked them instead of live the next hour and a half of this movie on whatever story.
Yeah.
I know. The
Because
movie would be over and the credits would roll 5 minutes
There's
in.
so many movies where you just think if they would have just used a cell phone, you'd go from the first minute to the last minute of the movie.
And it would be done.
And it would be done.
So many misunderstandings in movies.
Yeah. And I think that, what's interesting though is I was just saying this to somebody the other day that so many times in my life, the thing that's most helpful or most productive is the simplest thing right next to me that I don't see for a long time. And so even just saying, what, you just ask that one question.
Yep.
But there's something about, and I think therapeutically with us as clinicians or even like in a personal way, you have to do all this other stuff that almost like scaffolds these ways of understanding,
Yeah.
these ways of perspective shifting to where then you can reach that question. But before
Yeah.
then, maybe the question was just too high that
couldn't
you
even couldn't even get to the question. Like sometimes when if I really am triggered, if something actually really gets me and I pop out of my window of tolerance or whatever, I got to first find a way to get back in my body, get back to a place of at least regulation enough so that all my systems are online enough to even ask myself what happened.
Yeah.
Leanne Campbell, who's an EFT trainer, says you react and then you notice that you reacted. And if you can then catch that, you can kind of pull the thread back. What happened in the moment right before? You know, and if I can be kind and gentle and curious with myself, offer myself some compassion in that place and get curious about it, that helps me. And what also helps me is if my husband, who's really safe, really open, if I can process that with him sometimes, like this thing happened, you know, he knows me really well and he's so safe that sometimes just having his nervous system help my nervous system takes the load off of me a little and I have a bit more space.
Oh, I remember it was either you or Hopkins saying really early on, we can regulate ourselves 80% better in the presence of our
That's right.
primary attachment figure.
Yep, that's right. That's accurate. That's research.
I think that the difficult thing, though, is like the things that you're saying right now are ideal in an individual sense.
Yeah.
Because, like, if, you know, it's a couple, if it's me and Leanne and we're in the middle of a thing and I become aware to what's going on, in those moments, I can't really follow that thread back and those kind of things because we're in the middle of a thing. And so
you have to de-escalate first.
Yeah, if I become aware and I kind of like, you know, step to the side out of my body and I'm trying to like regulate myself, she's still in it.
Yep.
And so, and I think what's weird about us is that there's not really an all the time situation I can see where one of us is always pursuing and one of us is always withdrawing.
I think it's a real rare couple if it's only always one.
Yeah. And so if in those moments I'm withdrawing and she's pursuing, maybe she stays on the pursue track and I'm trying to like now dissect and run an autopsy on this thing to figure out how we...
You go to your head, she feels more alone, she pursues you even more.
So that's going to activate even...
Yep.
So I think that like even if in this mediator's office, like maybe, you know, Charlie was able to kind of go, oh, I see what's going on. But like, you know, Nicole was still...
Gone. She was dysregulated.
Yeah.
You saw it.
That's definitely, I mean, of course, you and I are going to advocate for this, but that's definitely one of the benefits of being in a room with a therapist is because you could be in a cycle, but the therapist gets to act as that, I don't know, guardian, intervener, like
choreographer.
Like bumpers on the bowling alley, like whatever you want to use.
Yeah, that's right.
To then be able to spot it and go, hey, we need a time out.
Like a mirror.
Let me ask you what's going on inside of you right now. That, you know, that's one of the benefits to that.
I agree.
One of the things that struck me as the movie went forward, and I think I said this either last week or the week before, but I first started becoming aware to this with the episode that Summer Kerwin did on Instant Family, is that I became aware that the movie is for sure trying to get me to align with certain characters.
Yes.
And I felt like coming out of that opening scene with Nicole storming out, all of a sudden I'm with Charlie.
Yeah.
Like clearly she is, I don't want to go so far as to say something's wrong with her, but like what's going on that she doesn't want to.
Yep. You immediately have like a sympathetic sort of view with him. Yeah. Right at the get-go.
Yeah. And then as the movie went on, it fills in pieces of the story enough. I don't think that I ever got to the place. I feel like with her exiting the office, I was all the way with Charlie. Now, at that point, opening scene, we know the least about both people.
Yes.
I don't think I ever got to the place where I was all the way with Nicole. But I did get to the place where I was like, I get it. I get where they're both coming from. And I think the one thing that I was struck by so much was it felt like for the majority of the movie, Charlie didn't fully know what was going on.
I totally agree. I feel like he still wasn't totally getting that.
Yeah.
Like really comprehending, or his impact, like that he wasn't engaged, and that contributed to the loss of the relationship. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I like saw him and I was like, oh, he's shut down. He's this brilliant sort of artist, and he can show up there with his full range of emotions. And I don't know if you were going to talk about the scene where he sings in it.
No. Well, I mean, that's like at the very end, right?
When he's performing that sort of karaoke, but it's almost like for a minute, it's like a musical number kind of. I was a little like, what's happening?
Yeah. It's almost like a weird commentary on.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like even then, I felt like he was starting to sort of wake up in a different sort of way. But there was like, he could do all of that stuff on the stage and then bring all of his brilliance there, and the way he was a parent. That was really interesting, the way he was able to be with his kid. Like it felt very genuine to me that he wanted to be connected to his son. But when it came to Nicole, he was even more connected, like with her family. Like it almost seemed like his relationship with her mom, he was like so there and that sort of thing. But with her, it was like, and I find this
he and the
often.
Mom exchanged emails.
Right, right. It feels like this to me in my practice often too, that I have, and it's not just men. I mean, the majority of more avoidant, like if we're looking at a continuum from anxious on one end to avoidant on the other end, and secure is sort of a point right in the middle. More men tend to be down the avoidant line. And I think a lot of that's our society too. Our culture really encourages men not to feel, to do instead of feel.
I was going to say, I wonder how much that is that perceived image of the man who's a rock and is quote unquote strong and almost stoic.
Yep. Like stoicism is incredibly rewarded. Look, you didn't even cry, or that didn't even seem to bother you. So I see more of that in my practice. And I saw this in Charlie. I thought, did anybody ever sit with you? Did anybody ever like look at your sweet face when you were the age that your son is? The way you're offering to him things that I bet you never even got for yourself. Anyone to ever say like, but what are you feeling? And when it is hard for you, or how are ways you could get your anger out, to really put words to that, or your sadness, or your longing to be seen and connected with. Like he even gave her notes at the end of this. You know what I mean? Like,
it was like her last performance, and when they got home, I can't remember if he had his little notebook or not, but she knew. And she was like, "You want to give me notes, don't you?" He's like, "No." And then it's like holding your breath. He could not keep it in.
He
so
could
he
not
had
do
to.
it.
Here's what I want to know though: is how can somebody that can be so in touch with, this might not be the right words for it, but performing
I already
emotion,
feel this. I feel this is an exciting, important question you're about to ask.
Yeah. How can somebody that's so in touch with performing emotion not be in touch with experiencing it
themselves
and communicating it, like communicating what's on their interior? Like, how is it he's able to read on a page, or maybe even write, so-and-so feels such and such, and shows it in this way, but yet his interior is not fully engaged? Because how else do you know emotion if you don't engage it?
It feels like it's a paradox, doesn't it? Like, how could it be? We're in Music City and work with a lot of musicians who have written songs, that can move people, bring people to their knees, make them weep, and then can't do it in their own relationships, can't feel it for themselves. Like, how do we explain that ability other than, here's a story I tell myself. I don't know that this is accurate. I haven't seen it in research, but I'm just going to throw it out between me and you, and we can chew on it and see what you think. I'd be really interested to see what you think. I think all of us are hardwired for it. And we can feel it in our bodies when we come into contact with it. But some of us don't know how to do it in our primary romantic relationships or in our primary familial relationships, but we can enjoy it at concerts, or when we see a movie that makes us cry or makes us feel things. And I think that there must be poets, musicians, actors who can bring those things to life if it's through a role, because I think that maybe there's a safety there that they don't feel in when they're themselves. Like when we lived in Los Angeles and we would my husband would act, or we would be in contact with these people who would do these most amazing, deep performances that you would think they must be the richest, deepest, most emotionally developed people you'd ever meet. And then you go to have like pancakes at night after a show, and it's not that way at all. You know, and I work with clients like that. I don't know if you have worked with people who have like that. I imagine you work with creatives and that sort of thing too, that like it can show up in the public sort of stage sense, but then in their personal life, it's really difficult. And I think it's about vulnerability and safety. I don't know. What do you think?
I wonder if that's like a reverse, almost shadow of, so sometimes to help a client get to a place, I'll do a thing that like Richard Rohr calls observing the other. And it's this exercise in trying to shift the perspective, like zoom up out of your body, view your body, yourself down there. Now ask you what it is you need, what it is you're feeling, and then can you offer those things to yourself?
Yeah.
So that's like kind of taking a step back, because sometimes we're
too in it.
We're very poor at offering ourselves compassion and grace.
Yes. It's easier to do for others a lot of times.
And so I wonder if this is like a reverse kind of shadow way of that, where like I'm unwilling or unable to access these things in me. So I'm going to take a step back.
Yeah.
Maybe put something in between me, or, you know, I read this book. I think the first book I read this year is called The Alter Ego Effect. And the guy he's not a therapist, but he is a, like performance coach for like athletes and business people. And he advocates for developing an alter ego and developing an enemy, so that, and having like a totem that you use to activate the alter ego. And he gave the example of Bo Jackson, Auburn, right?
Yeah, yes.
So like
number 34, are you kidding?
Yeah. So like Bo Jackson, he met at some conference he was teaching at one time and was kind of like telling Bo what he's going to talk about. And he said, Bo leaned over to him and said, Bo Jackson never played a down of football in his life. When he stepped on the football field, he said he became Jason from Friday the 13th, because in his early career, he was so, he would lose control on the field. And his anger would get the best of him. That he realized, if I'm not in control, I don't get to make decisions about what I'm doing. And so he kind of saw, you know, that movie and said, you know, here's this guy who is steadily moving forward all the time, who no matter what he encounters, it doesn't stop him.
I love this so much.
And his totem was the field. So when he stepped on the field,
it triggered that.
It triggered the thing.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if, you know, this kind of thing that like what Charlie is doing with his plays, performances, whatever they are.
Performance art?
Yeah. I told Leanne, I was like, why don't when you were in New York, we should have gone to a weird like play like this where they're out in the audience. There's no
rules.
Yeah, they're out in the audience and they're doing stuff. And I was like, oh no, wait, I would have hated that. So I wonder if that's what he's doing, where it's like, but it's the reverse, where I don't want to access these things, but because I'm human, they're in me. I got to get them out. So if I channel them out through,
it's like an appropriate way, to let my longing come out.
You said safe, maybe you know, safe for them because it's less dangerous to my true stuff that's inside.
Well, isn't that so true? Like I work with men in my office. I'll just use this as like a stereotype, like someone who's more avoidant come in and say, I don't do feelings. And yet they will tell me about a football game and their eyes light up, or they'll get tears in their eyes. Do you know what I mean? And so they can actually cheer and yell and cry and be angry. So I'm like, you can, but where is it safe for you to explore those emotions? Nowhere except for football, nowhere except for your music. Like you could actually feel if it was in a musical environment, right? So the container that we're in has everything to do, I think, with how safe we feel to express our emotions. And so all we're trying to do is not take away people's protections, but give you better coping, hopefully, and then also a wider range. Just flexibility. That's all I'm really looking for, is more of a dimmer switch than like an on-off button for emotions. Like, can you titrate your emotional regulation abilities? So when I first went to therapy, I hadn't cried in a long time. You know, I was pretty shut down. And as I sat with my therapist, what would happen is almost like these waves of emotion would come up and burst, and I would cry hard. So I was like, When am I going to get to the stage of like just a tear coming down my cheek where I can still actually
the girl
speak?
cry where you take your fingers and you press
just
them up
wipe
against your tear ducts.
The gentle, delicate Yoplait
yeah.
commercial cry.
I was asking Leanne about because we're watching The Bachelor this season. I was like, why? What are you trying to shove the tears back in? And she's
and
like,
save
they're
your
trying
makeup
to make it to where the makeup doesn't.
That's
run.
it.
But I'm like, but how does that help? Like, why wouldn't you reach for a tissue and do that? That would soak it up.
But then you'd be crying. The tissue would be,
okay.
that's too much.
Is that admitting defeat?
That's right. That's right. If you can just
it's
gently wipe it with your hand.
That's
right. Yeah. So what happened over time in therapy, I thought I would get to a place again where I don't cry anymore or I cry beautifully or whatever. But what actually happened is my window of tolerance widened. So instead of it being like a garden hose that had a knot in it and all the water was backing up and then I let it go and everything just flew out with high pressure, as I worked through therapy, things would start to come out more and more over time. And so it actually didn't feel as
like
intense.
An IV.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, was the undoing of the knot, was that these like waves of emotion that would come out? Okay, so like that was you either purposefully or unpurposefully like releasing.
Yes.
And that's why it was so
violent,
I was going to say violent, yeah.
It was. That's what it felt like. And it was fearful for me because I went from having this numbness that protected me and kept me from feeling what I was afraid to feel to then I got into safer and safer environments that made more of the stuff come up more and more. And then as I was processing with a therapist, initially it would be so violent. I mean, that really is the word. I would be afraid, and she would hold this beautiful space for me, make sure that I was good to leave session and everything out of that. But over time, it wasn't so intense. Not that when grief comes that there aren't initially or from time to time those intense places, but that wasn't really the norm. I thought that's what therapy was always going to be when I first went.
Oh.
And it's not. It
good
was
for you for keeping going then.
Yeah, I had a lot of good support. It really helped me. A lot of people in my corner, supporting me going and saying to me, it gets better. It's not always this deep or this intense, but like you're talking about trauma, you're talking about grief, like there's some stuff to work out here,
And I even try to kind of frame sessions and I'm even aware of this a little bit whenever I ask not clients, but friends or something, hey, how was your set? Like, I never want to say, was it a good session or a bad session? Because I always know that like there's times where with my therapist, I would like cry my eyes out or he would confront something in me. But I would have said, that was really like, I got a lot out of that. And so I try to always ask, was it a productive session?
That's a great question.
Because like there's times where I walk out on cloud 9 and there's times where I walk out feeling like I was in a war.
Yeah, that's right.
But if I got something out of, because maybe I didn't get as much out of the cloud 9 as I did out of the war.
Right.
And sometimes like, my therapist would say something to me that I walked out gritting my teeth and grumbling, how could he? And the more I reflect on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a sniper's like ability to zone in on exactly that little button I needed pushed, to now everything's unfolding throughout the week. When I come in the next week, I'm like, oh man, I thought about all this stuff in between. And
no, that's right. That's exactly it. Yeah. That's how I felt too.
One of the things that struck me, and I mentioned it, was Charlie kind of feeling like he never really got everything that was happening.
Yeah.
As the story unfolds, it felt like, which maybe they did this on purpose, I would assume so, with Nicole leaving at the beginning, all of a sudden we're sitting with Charlie for the majority of the thing. It felt like he kept getting bad news.
Yeah, I did.
Like
even from the lawyer.
Like Nicole all of a sudden starts meeting with Laura Dern's character, her lawyer,
who's like this total bulldog, really.
Which I thought was such a weird. Like I experienced her almost in a bipolar is not the word I want to use, but like polar,
hot and cold.
Yeah, because she would be so personal with her
and like
in
sit
the
on
office,
the couch with her,
kicked
and
off her high heels.
Yes.
Made sure she had like a drink and that kind of thing. But
soothing,
then when it came to doing the job, she was like...
It's like a switch flipped, really.
Mm-hmm. And so Nicole hires her, and all of a sudden it's Charlie's getting served papers.
Yeah.
we're establishing residency in LA.
Yeah.
The custody is going to be like this. And then he gets a call at one point that's like, hey, have you gotten a lawyer? You need to respond to this. And he's like, oh, well, I'm trying. Like, I'm thinking. She's like, it's been 30 days. At this point, if it doesn't happen in the next day or two, you will lose full custody of your child. And at that point, I think he was in the middle of rehearsals for a play or something where he stepped out in a stairwell.
Yeah.
At least 2 actors come down to ask him questions while he's on the phone. And at one point, he holds the phone away from his face to start talking to this actor while the lawyer's saying your kid will not have the ability to have custody with you.
Yeah.
And it's like he's just never really grasping.
No.
I think that's really the first kind of like shock to the system that he gets.
Yeah.
To say, oh, I need to get in this and make sure that...
Like, it even felt more than just, is it real or not, but like the gravity, like life is going to be different and you have to kind of show up and engage in this process, even though I almost feel like his whole, like the motor is like, give me just a minute, like give me just another minute, hold on just a second. Like everything was like coming for him. I felt this pressure, the whole time.
Do you think it's fair to say that he prioritized his work, his art, whatever it is, higher than he did the relationships?
I think he did. I don't know that it was intentional, but like him thinking, let me write on a list and I'll put work at number 1. I think it was like, this is my work. This is my job. This is my passion. Of course I care about you. Of course I care about my kid. I think it was his identity. And so I don't even know that there was a place where his directing separated from his any other part of him,
Which is probably why he couldn't not give her those notes.
He could not do it. I mean, it was
Because
part
there's
of
no
their
difference
relationship
in
at that point.
The director of him and the
husband
of him, they're the same person.
So I have clients like this too, who are like CEOs, own their own company, and then come home and still operate in that same sort of way with their families, and then wonder why it doesn't work, and are honestly baffled. Like it is a genuine confusion because they're so comfortable and can operate and can communicate actually really well in that role. But it doesn't work at home because it's not the same kind of bond. It's not the same kind of a relationship. But if you haven't had secure bonding, that what this sort of give and take, leaning on each other, counting on each other kind of thing is supposed to be, it's hard to step out of that director role or a caregiver role or, any of the other sort of personas we take on just to do the stuff that we all do.
That alter ego book gave the example of a dad who wanted to be more present with his kids. So he kind of thought to, what's a good dad look like? Who do I know it's a good dad?
Yeah.
And his totem was this like dad baseball cap thing that he had, to where when he got home,
put his cap
he would
on.
always make sure that the phone went down on a table and literally he would put the baseball cap on.
Like Mr. Rogers, right?
And yeah.
I
and
love
it would give him
that.
permission to behave in the way. And my first concern in reading this book was it was advocating fake it till you make it.
Right.
But then what I realized was it was helping people overcome blocks because they knew what type of person they wanted to be, but they had convinced themselves they couldn't be that person.
And the block was, it's almost like we need a visceral sort of felt sense of the difference. So a totem or grounding yourself. Sometimes when I come home from work, I just change clothes. It's like Mr. Rogers, and like I'm now in family mode. I'm not going to be answering emails. You know, it's a thing that I have to talk to clients about. I'm not actually an emergency service provider. I'm not 24 hours on. I'm not always checking emails and texts. I shouldn't be, right? That stuff will burn anybody out. But like flipping the switch for myself, changing clothes, even if it's just kicking my shoes off, taking my bra off after a long day, getting into pajamas or something at the end of the day, coming into it, like I'm in family mode. This is where I am. I think that physical sort of shifts or meditation in your driveway or some kind of mantra, something like that, like something we can hold on to can really help us so much with shifting in that way.
So he keeps kind of encountering these wake up calls.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
There's certainly jolts. Like it's like he experiences them as like these blind sides over and over
He
again.
does. Yeah. And I think some of them really, really knock him down.
Yeah.
Some of them almost kind of, I don't want to say they empower him, but they do knock him forward, I think. The next thing that really, like with this movie, I think stands out to me is he had gotten an apartment and Nicole comes there for some reason. I can't remember why.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the scene where I was saying at the beginning, I felt this tension in me for the whole movie. This is the scene that released it because it felt like them deciding at the beginning to be quote unquote amicable.
Yes.
Really for them was like, we're not going to talk about the real thing.
We just won't talk about it.
Yeah.
And the absence of conflict is not peace.
Right. And so in this scene, I don't remember how it started, but I told Leanne, this is the absolute slow build to this eruption of tension where they have this conversation that maybe lasts, I actually don't know how long it lasts. It felt like 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know if that was it,
I
though.
don't know either, but it did feel like eternity.
It felt like a long time. Throughout the course of the conversation, they are, and this was something that drove me crazy watching it, and I look back now and I really like it. The camera stays in one position for a lot of it, and they move from room to room. So at some points you can hear them going at it, but you can't see them.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I've had couples clients before where the pursuer will follow the other person room to room. But it kind of like culminates in both of them. And this is like the quintessential Adam Driver. Yelling as loud as they can, the most horrible things to each other, where I think the last thing he yells was something like, whenever I see you sleeping, I imagine you dying in the most horrible way so I could be free from your... And he yells out this last thing. The camera is pulled tight in on his face. His face is shaking. He's red. He's crying. And he immediately collapses down on the floor on his knees, like violently sobbing and crying. And Leanne and I were kind of talking about what's going on there. And I initially thought he realizes that he has said the most horrible thing he could ever say. And he is immediately feeling shame and grief and guilt about it. And Leanne was like, oh, I think that it's the first time that those emotions have...
I think so too.
...been able to come out. And
he's actually
power
hearing
of
it.
that release...
Yeah.
It was like, it's what you said. He unkinked the knot.
It was, and it was violent to him.
Yeah.
As much as it was spewing out of him, it was happening to him as well. Mm-hmm. I think so too. And I thought, this is what it made me think of too. So we know from research that the avoidance strategy out of all four is the most fragile coping strategy too. That it can hold and hold and hold and hold, but it's like a dam, only so much
Until
pressure.
And you don't get to choose when it can't.
And you don't get to choose. And then the cracks come and then it just gives way. Mm-hmm. And there's no other option but for everything to come bursting out. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's either in or it is leaking out or it explodes. Like those are your sort of options. And so what I thought of when he collapsed to the floor is there's the collapse of his strategy too. It's gone. There's no more avoidance. There's no more ability to numb out, shut it down, focus on some other thing. It's all right here, right now. The dam has given way. All of this stuff has come out.
Because really, once he said those things that he said, you can't unring that bell.
You can't unring
that
the bell.
toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube.
No. Yeah. For himself either.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting is, and I don't even want to ask if you've had clients like this because we're people that are like this.
Yeah.
But like, there are times where I have said, I feel ashamed even saying that I had this thought. That's the thing that where it's like we are somehow identifying with integrating our thoughts as a part of us. And
yeah, that's right.
I'm not the type of person that can think, or I don't want to be the type of person that would think, when the truth is, like, we are not our thoughts. Our thoughts aren't us. If that were true, every time somebody cut me off in traffic, I'm a murderer.
Right.
Like,
right.
And I've said many times it's a good thing God didn't give me superpowers because I would use laser vision like every time. And I even think there was this movie called Chronicle that came out years ago where these three teens get these telekinetic powers. and they're driving down the road, and one of them, like, there's a car behind him kind of like tailgating, and one of them turns back and uses the telekinesis he moves his hand like gently to one side, and the car rolls off the road. That would be what I would do. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm not that.
No, and
that's just a thought coming from anger and fear.
Crosses your mind. That's right. And it's supposed to just cross and float on into the distance.
But both of them really holding on to the feeling and the thoughts and all of that.
Yeah.
And really with her, you almost see, because she got this distance with him, these things are coming out of her that he is perceiving. And I think this is when her character leads at the beginning, we stay with him. He's perceiving as these like threatening, how could she?
Yes.
This isn't the person I knew.
Yes, what's going on?
When it really was the whole time, but there was just never the room for her to even, I guess, find it in herself to explore.
No.
You know, and I think there's that line that, I don't remember which character said it, but if it's something you want, it's a decision. If it's something she wants, it's a deal, or it's a, I think so. It's like a deal, or it's a process or something like that, where he always clearly knew, like, this is what I want. We're doing it.
That's right.
And then with her,
and it was a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With her, it was a deal. With her, it's a deal. Like, it's, I'm acquiescing to, I'm not valuing what it is that you want as much as I'm valuing what it is that I want. And then, I mean, and the movie goes, they do get divorced. And like at the end, it seems like they've arrived at a place that's amicable. But even then, you know, they're kind of walking down a street trick-or-treating at the end. And I remember saying to Leanne, I don't know how to feel at this end.
I know.
Because it's not like it's a hopeful.
It's not. It's like, okay, he can go with you now. And like, that's okay. It was almost like a, okay. That's
acceptance?
Like acceptance. It wasn't necessarily gladness or like hopeful or, hey, they're going to be besties or anything. I don't know what I was even
Nicole's
hoping
dating
for.
somebody. He shows up at the mom's house, and that guy's there, and they kiss, and he's still doing. He says, "I started this play thing at this local theater." So it's almost, oh my gosh, she got what she wanted. She has a relationship where somebody is recognizing her. He is still in the relationship with his work, which is maybe what he wanted.
That's right.
I don't know if it is or not.
Yep, but that was, I mean, that's where they ended up. I think that's probably part of what feels very real, but not necessarily very kind of Hollywood wrapped up with a pretty bow, which I think, I don't know, there's like the little girl in me, maybe raised on a lot of Disney movies, always feels like there should be this happily ever after kind of a, what's the best case scenario here? But I wonder if that isn't best case. I would hope for Charlie that he could find connection and depth and knowing himself and all of that, but that would ultimately be his choice too.
Well, I wonder if this is like a scaffolding thing, because him coming to that theater in LA, he's closer.
That's true.
So the thing
he's not in New York.
The thing with Nicole's over, like, but he's now at a place. Nicole is getting what she wants. Maybe it's an opportunity for him to, like, he's just like a step higher to get towards it. And
he is with Henry. He, you know, wanted to have those parenting, that custody. What was it? 55-45 was the whole conversation. Yeah. He does get to have custody. And so that relationship, I'm so, like, I would be so curious. I wish there was like a, where are they now? You know, that we could go back and watch 5 years, 10 years down the road.
I'll say this really quick and we'll move it. The whole him not access, like, he ends up cutting his arm, going, Charlie does, going to the sink, trying to run water over it, use paper towels. He is clearly bleeding out. Like, he is bleeding so much. He ends up collapsing on the floor,
to the floor.
And Henry, like, walks over. Dad, are we, you know, is everything okay? And it's this, like, inability to admit, I need something. I can't, he can't get there. The thing about the ambiguous endings, I don't know what the difference is in me. I didn't like this one.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to evaluate it that much, but like I didn't feel settled with it. But like Castaway, at the very end, Tom Hanks makes it back. He goes and
Yes.
sees Helen Hunt. She's
Yes.
already with somebody
She's
else and moved
married.
on.
Yeah.
The last shot is him at a four-way
Yes.
intersection,
Yes.
standing there, and it doesn't indicate which way he chooses to go. And I loved that.
I love that ending too. That ambiguity didn't bother me, but this feels somewhat unfinished more than ambiguous to me. I don't know why.
Maybe it's like I remember, kind of, and I think I articulated this as a child of divorce, but I remember we talked about it in class too. Like divorce is sometimes worse than death because
Yes.
death has a finality.
There's no closure.
The hope is over, you
Yeah.
know, whatever. With divorce, like there's a chance it continues on. With Castaway, it felt like he goes to Helen Hunt, he sees her, it's closed, it's done. Now the world is his oyster.
It does. There's
Whereas
closure.
with this,
Yep.
that they're going to keep, and really that last shot, it's the two of them and Henry in the middle walking down a street forward. That's going to be the rest of their life.
It is. Ugh. I know that
Of
feeling really
navigating
well.
that.
That's right. The tension's actually not gone. There was a release of pressure in Castaway. And I feel like we're left with a bit of that pressure at the end of this movie,
Yeah.
which is realistic. That actually is what that feels like.
But
Yeah.
hopefully with both of them getting, I don't know if he's getting his needs met, but she is.
She is. She seems to be. And he hasn't cut them all off, which is interesting too. There is still some sort of connection with mom, with sister, with Nicole. Like, I agree with you. I think that's a step forward from where he was too, and maybe some scaffolding towards maybe even intimacy at some point for him, like what that might look like.
So I asked you this question last time, but I
Yeah.
want to ask you again. Tell me something that your clients have taught you.
Oh yeah. I think recently, my clients are teaching me about genuineness and just really being present in session the way that they are. Like this courage that it takes to actually really show up and talk about dreams, losses, hard things, longings, wanting to be in this better place takes a great deal of honesty and looking in and that sort of thing. And what I'm learning in showing up to sessions right now, more than any sort of method or intervention or any of that, the more present I can just be with them too. It seems like this work unfolds, and we're both trained. I mean, so the tools that we're reaching for when they show up in the room are going to be these clinical sort of tools, but like really trusting in the therapeutic relationship, trusting my gut, trusting showing up and being really honest and present. If that means that there are tears that come down my face when the client is crying, that's okay, because there's this space between us that's sacred, that's really safe. And I feel like right now there's just this season where my clients are teaching me over and over and over again just about presence, just about showing up and really being wholly there, gut, heart, head, all together.
I think that there's something tremendously, I was asking a client the other day how many people he knew in his life that were really 100% present with him. And when he couldn't really kind of think of that, I said, how many people, when you spend time with them and walk away, you feel better? Because I think that is an
That's a great
evidence that that's
indicator.
going on. Like,
Yeah.
because when somebody is truly with me, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel connected with, and that like feeds a part of me that doesn't get fed by the millions of other people that I encounter all the time.
Yeah.
Even though maybe those other people, quote unquote, give me more,
Yep.
I get more with somebody who's really present.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's almost like instead of it costing me energy, I'm at least neutral, if not filled up
Yeah.
even more after.
And so I tried telling that client, like, use that as the,
It's a good
like, look
gauge.
for the shadow if you can't see the light.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
So
that's right.
this is a new question. Tell
Okay.
me something that you do to take care of yourself.
Oh yeah. I've talked about this a little bit on like social media and that kind of thing, but something that is essential for me is moving my body. So I've had depression my whole life since I was a little kid. It's something that is seasonal for sure, and we're in the middle of February right now, dark outside, not a lot
you
of
have one of those
hours of
lights?
sunlight. I do.
Nice.
Blue light that you plug in the morning. And if I was a lizard, I would just curl up on a rock in the sun. That's like would be my natural sort of state. But what I have found is in lieu of actual sunlight, if I can get my heart rate up and move my body several times a week, if that's walking, if it's running, if it's lifting some weights, if it's yoga or spinning or something that releases some endorphins, get a bit of a sweat on, I can feel like physically stuff is moving up and out. It actually helps me get in touch with my emotions. It helps me clear a little bit of space. I can tell that my mood is a little bit better, even in these darker months, even in times like when depression comes. And I've had a very blue last couple of weeks getting to, if I can't like get the energy up to go to the gym and actually go to classes, even stretching, standing, opening the blinds, like moving around my house, getting some movement. It's like that physical thing kind of we were talking about. It's almost like a signal to my brain even before I feel like moving. When I start to move my body enjoys that. And then I don't feel quite so stuck. Like I literally feel less stuck in places if I can move. So it's something I've been asking clients about recently too. Like, how are you caring for your physical body? Like our physical body, our emotional selves, our spiritual selves are all so connected. I feel like they're all really connected. So that's been a huge help for me. And I don't think you have to go to the gym per se, but I have a great group of friends at my gym. We all take a certain class 3 times a week together, and they miss me when I'm not there. I feel seen in that place. We
There's
joke with each other.
Connection,
That's right. Yep.
like added into the self-care you're already doing by taking care of your body, physically moving it.
Yep.
Which I would imagine just augments it.
Well, it does. And there's tons of research out there too that say in order to really and truly care for yourself really well, it actually helps to have the social piece, the connection piece, because we're mammals. We're wired for that social support, for that connection. And so it is absolutely an added benefit that not only does my body feel better, but my heart feels better,
I had a coworker in San Diego who, in regards to his workouts, but I kind of adopt this in a lot of other areas too. He would always say something is better than nothing.
Yep.
And so like you were saying, if I can't make it to the gym, just kind of going around the house, stretching, doing these kinds of things, like even just realizing something is better than nothing and just taking those little steps, because that is, maybe you don't have it in you to go and do the whole class this afternoon, but to even like lunge around the living room or just do something to recognize this is something I do for me. And like most things in life, at times I won't feel like doing it, but like recovery language is take the action, the feeling will follow.
Yeah, I totally agree. My sister and I will just text each other #NRT, which is just next right thing. So if we're in a stuck place, I'm not going to focus on, the whole day is looming ahead of me and I'm feeling low. So I have to get on shoes and then I have to shower and then this and then this. No.
You put on your shoes before you shower?
Yeah, I know. I put that's probably why I feel it takes me so long to get ready. All my shoes are wet. So it's like, just focus on just what is the next thing to care for myself, the next loving act, the next thing that will take pressure off, the next thing, instead of thinking about meeting a standard or looking a certain way or it needing to be the whole day. Sometimes that really honestly is just too much. And that's exactly true. If I can just think about just the next step and just have that. I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, when you're trying to get to a new place, you don't have to look at the whole staircase, just the next step. My kids used to do this, right? They were scared of the dark. And so we would go and just turn the light on at the bottom of the stairs. And then that would light the stairs. And then at the top of the stairs, you turn the light on to the hallway. And then you could go down the hallway and turn the light on in your room. But if you stand at the bottom of the stairs thinking my room is dark, how am I going to get there? It could be paralyzing, but it's just the next thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. And that'll take you far, and then who knows, your feelings can shift and then you feel in a different sort of place. And very, very rarely have I left, moving my body and felt like worse on the other side. I typically do feel better, even if it takes me 30 minutes to put my shoes on if I'm in a depression,
And even if like you don't feel better from the exercise. Like if it's a particularly challenging workout
Sure.
and you feel sore or something,
Yep.
you may feel better by accomplishing something that you didn't think you could.
Yeah, that's right.
So
And
you still
maybe
get
I got
a
to see
level
a
of
friend.
satisfaction, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. I have actually gone to my class before and then sat in the gym and watched my friends work out and just been there and been present. And that actually felt better on the other side too.
I wouldn't have thought about that I like that too, yeah.
Yeah, just went and hung out with my coach
Because even
and friends.
then, and I think just even knowing you, like for you to get to celebrate what they're doing
that
would bring
feels
something.
joyful to me.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, look, you just picked that heavy thing up off the ground. Look at you
Yeah,
go. That's
I like that.
amazing. I strongly believe in subtle sort of little shifts making the hugest difference. It's not these huge acts typically that
Yeah.
it's not. I mean, again, my clients teach me that too. Like this movement, this step, and then you just see it. Like it can snowball. It can have this domino effect. Not always, but it can really shift a lot of things to just keep showing up for yourself. To keep, coming back to love over and over and over again.
So let's say somebody was listening today and they thought, man, Teri, I could really connect with her. I'd really love to see her as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
So if you're looking for counseling, it's just terimurphycounseling.com. You can look at my About Me, the kind of work that I do. You can even schedule appointments and everything right there online. If you're looking more for like coaching, if you're a new therapist or someone that has like more of the business side of things, you're looking for a supportive community of other therapists, head to terimurphy.com. And I've got all kinds of resources and everything there that people
Yeah, you
can
got
find.
a big kind of project that's launching.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I've got a mastermind for mental health professionals. And I've actually got a beta test program that's coming up that is going to be this 3-month intensive for therapists that, again, they can find out more information on my website if they're interested in finding peer support and work on their own, self-care and business work.
Yeah.
That's what that's about.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Teri, thank you so much for coming back.
This is
It is
always awesome.
literally always a pleasure. And
Thank
I look
you.
forward to it every time.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me. It's a great conversation.
Nice. Hey, everybody. I cannot say enough about how much I love having Teri on the show. I mean, I mentioned during our interview, I had the privilege and honor of sitting underneath her as a professor during my grad program. Or I guess it was in her preparing to be a professor. She was a TA, but she did teach. I have had the chance of going to internship modules where she was a mentor. I've staffed cases with her. Since graduating, she's my friend. I look up to her so much. And I think to be able to sit with somebody who also has a passion for making mental health and learning about relationships not only accessible to others, but to have it become something that isn't difficult to understand, to be able to sit with that kind of person. And on top of that, have that be someone who is just so incredibly brilliant and fun. It's just always a good time. It's always a pleasure. And I just count it, luck that, or a blessing, or however, we want to frame it, that I ended up in Nashville, I ended up at Trevecca, and ended up, getting a chance to meet her. It's just, I think that my life is an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the people that I've been put in the midst of. And I'm just so thankful that I get to have friends and loved ones that I do. And speaking of loved ones, we are in the middle of Love Month, week 3, here in the Therapist Theater. And so I can't help but reflect on the love that's present in my life today, February 20th, 3 years ago. I was standing in Zany's Comedy Club on the stage waiting on a beautiful woman to walk through that door. Leanne came in, and I got down on one knee, and I asked her to be my wife 3 years ago today. She said yes, and it has been the absolute greatest blessing in my entire life. She is the absolute best gift that God has ever given me. She has changed my life in every way. She has been my confidant, my companion, my confronter in a compassionate way. I'm trying to use alliteration here. But she's my wife. She's my partner. I love her with my whole heart. I love you, my love. Happy engage anniversary. And I'm going to say that's the show for this week. She didn't mention it on the show, but if you want to kind of have a daily dose of Teri, if you are on Instagram and you search at Dr. Teri Murphy, DrTeriMurphy, she has great content every day, including a live show that her and her husband Chris do every morning, I think around 7. So that's a really good resource to have. Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.